Ryanair's controversial Afrikaans quiz for South African travellers has finally been scrapped. The test was widely criticised, with the Department of Home Affairs labelling it a backward profiling system.
Well, the airline had previously said it implemented it due to the high prevalence of fraudulent South African passports. In the quiz, South African travellers were required to answer 12 questions in Afrikaans. But Ryanair's CEO says this week it wasn't appropriate and did not make sense. Let's get a reaction now from the CEO of the Afrikaans Language Council, Dr. Conrad Steenkamp. Dr. Steenkamp, thank you so much for your time this morning. I mean, first of all, I would just really like your take on this imposition of the Afrikaans test by Ryanair. Did it make sense?
Well, look, the imposition of any language in that way would not have been appropriate. In this case, one understands they wanted to test passports, but you can't do it using a language in this way. You can't determine somebody's nationality by through the language or languages that they can speak. It doesn't make linguistic sense. So you have roughly 20 million people in the country understand Afrikaans. The rest don't. It doesn't make sense. Even the use of only English in that context would have been problematic.
So do you feel, Dr. Steenkamp, that this has given Afrikaans somewhat of a bad PR, for lack of a better word, that it has made, the people who speak Afrikaans seem as though they are not okay people?
Yes, it did several things, and we must appreciate the fact that many people have bad old memories, to put it simply, and one understands that. It's on the other hand, along with negative sentiment in the hearts of some people, one also, however, had a lot of negative perceptions and inaccurate stereotypes going out, which re-stigmatized Afrikaans in the eyes of the world. So, yes, Ryanair created a difficult situation for us, but the lesson to be learnt out of this is that, one, people do not understand enough about Afrikaans on the one hand, and two, the discussion between Afrikaans and the other indigenous languages in this country hasn't even started.
You know, as you're speaking about this and taking a look at the now ripple effects of having the imposition of the Afrikaans language as even a test, by an airline, number one, it speaks to perhaps the ignorance of many individuals, even in high-powered, positions such as this, the CEO of Ryanair Airline, who is going to be able to allow for this to actually happen. So, number one, there are clearly a whole lot of ignorant people in the world still about South Africa as well as its country makeup. But number two, it also perhaps even when this story broke, I won't lie to you, Dr. Conrad, it left a bitter taste, and I'll tell you why. Because for a long time in the South African discourse before 1994, Afrikaans was seen as a language of the oppressor. And in that sense, when 1976 happened, it was all about how do we free ourselves and eradicate ourselves from what was used to oppress a black nation, because they then could not study simply because they couldn't understand the language. This, for example, brings up the re-stigmatization of not only Afrikaans, but also perhaps even conjures up the bad memory of an apartheid institution that was administered in Afrikaans.
Yes, no, look, I agree, and that's almost a given. Soweto 76 left physical wounds, but also deep psychological wounds. And we had a long process of reconciliation within the Afrikaans community, and it's clear that these discussions, although they made a lot of progress, never end. They continue. Now, it is also clear to me that there's a lot of inaccurate stereotypes within this debate. That's one of the things that the Ryanair debacle really excelled in, is mobilizing all these inaccurate stereotypes. For example, Afrikaans is not a white language. It is, the majority of its speakers are black or colored. So the other one is that Afrikaans, people started talking Afrikaans, so the first forms of Afrikaans came about long before the Dutch even set up shop in the Cape. The Khoi Afrikaans is the first form of Afrikaans, and it came into being very much like Swahili as a language of trade. So, yes, I agree with you fully that this one mobilized the Ryanair experience, for lack of a better word, mobilized a lot of memories and emotions, also, however, negative sentiment, and highlighted the fact that Afrikaans speakers and the speakers of the other indigenous languages have not been talking to one another. There is a lot of preconceptions and perceptions that can only be addressed if we start talking. We have a desperate need, from our side at least, from the Afrikaans side, to start engaging.
Now, just before we let you go, Dr. Steenkamp, you've mentioned a certain perception that Ryanair has created with this controversial test, but what is the feeling among, Afrikaans-speaking people in terms of how they feel like they're being perceived, how they feel like now potentially they could get treated, that, oh yeah, look, not only, as Faith mentioned, how Afrikaans was seen as a language of oppression, that now it's bringing back that, oh, now not only did not only did people of Afrikaans-speaking people oppress here in South Africa, now they're trying to put it out, on airlines. So what are the people, Afrikaans-speaking people, feeling at this moment?
Yes, well, look, I can't speak on behalf of all Afrikaans-speaking people, but I did ask a couple of people, incidentally, how they feel. And one of the emotions that came out actually is very similar to the other responses we discussed, namely anger. Anger that, and combined with a feeling of powerlessness. We have no decision, we have no power and decision-making power over Ryanair's ability to impose the language or use the language in this way. In fact, they simply ignored us. We wrote them many emails and tweets and whatever. They just ignored us. So we felt powerless. And this is this sense came out across the board from a variety of Afrikaans speakers, the full range of speakers of Afrikaans.
Wow,
over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Conrad Steenkamp, it really is a conversation that perhaps we need to hold as a country more than anything else. I think the global community about just learn our country more before making certain impositions on those of the country. Maybe that is the one big lesson here, is just read about South Africa. We'll leave it there. The CEO of the Afrikaans Language Council, Dr. Conrad Steenkamp there. More than anything else, I think it's just read. I think if we all were able to read the room, or at least have an understanding of the countries within which you are operating for, in just a business sense, if you're going to do business in a specific country for a specific countryman or duty, read. Read.
If they're not getting things wrong where language is concerned, they think we use lions as a form of transport. So, the international community just read, as Faith says.